This episode is brought to you by the European Coworking Assembly. We are everything Coworking Europe. If you head to the Coworking Assembly website, you can connect with our World Coworking, European Freelancers Week, Coworking Symposium, Coworking Library, and Coworking Tools.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another swashbuckling episode of the Coworking Values Podcast. And with me in my luxury co-working studio today is Tony Bacigalupi. So, sir, what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for?
I would say that I might be known as the guy who did a video for the Daily News YouTube channel teaching people how to sing karaoke, but probably more people know me as a guy who led the charge to open Manhattan's first co-working space in New York City. It was called New Work City. And we opened our doors in 2008, right when co-working was starting to become a big deal. And so we caught the press and we got very active in the online discussions on coworking.org and all of those things, and started going to the conferences when conferences were starting to become a thing for co-working. And so to some degree, I'm just known as being somebody who's been a part of the co-working movement for most of the co-working movement's life, and for being just a very enthusiastic champion of it. And as far as what do I want to be known for, certainly I'd love to be known as somebody who has been an excellent family man. I'd be blessed to be able to say that that I was a wonderful father and husband. And beyond that, I would say I'd like to be remembered as somebody who inspired people to feel like better things are possible and to take action on those things, and to ultimately make the world inside them and around them a more wonderful place. I think I'll leave it at that.
That's beautiful. Sometimes people say like being the first person on Mars, but when people give lines like that, it's lovely. What was it you said there? Like, give people hope there is a better possibility.
Yeah, just that we have so much power as humans to generate the outcomes that we want, or that we focus on, that we spend our time thinking about. And it's so easy to get sucked into cynicism or apathy, just kind of accepting the status quo. And we just don't have to. We can benefit from our own ability to imagine something better and then make it real. That's what happened with me with coworking. I saw what other people were doing in other cities, and I said, this is possible because I saw somebody else doing it, and there's no reason why we can't do it here. And then I went and did it, and I did it with a bunch of other people who wanted it too, who wanted that better life, who didn't want to just be cooped up in their homes, talking to their cats, and spending all day in their pajamas. And they wanted to be around other amazing people and feel inspired and feel like they were part of something. And so because we were inspired by other people's actions, we saw how we could do it and we believed in it. And then we went and built it. And then we inspired lots of other people to do similar things all over the world. And so I just want to keep doing lots more of that. And if we do enough of that collectively, then maybe we can kind of steer the course of our world in a better direction.
I'm there. That little bit you just described there is every co-working space I've been a part of, whether it's been for, a few months or a few years. I've had that kind of bumping into people, thinking stuff happening, projects come out of nowhere. You end up sitting having a coffee for 3 days in a row, and then someone says, oh, we need to do, usually in my case, it's some kind of podcast or video, and, we end up doing an event. But it is that bumping into each other. It's the magical friction. There's a couple of things here, because we're going to end up talking about loneliness, which has been a big theme. And I think this, now I've really got it. I always agreed with it, and now I've really got it. But it is, so I joined Meetup in 2008, and that is where I first found you. And that is what I attribute the first time I found the word co-working online. And I saw you in New Work Cities, and there's all these like grainy pictures of people at desks working on projects together. And I thought, what you just described there, I thought, oh, this is possible. And I was running a networking group at the time, and we looked into opening one of these places where people work together. And I still don't understand real estate, but the only reason we didn't start a co-working space in London in 2008 is we didn't have like, £30,000 deposit for the building. And the other place we got shown was a basement that looked like a, illegal boxing ring might be run out in it. But that little meetup thing started something. And I'm going with that meetup thing because I'm going to seamlessly sidestep to, Scott and the gang when they started that. It was use the internet to get off the internet. And I love that riff. And now there's this conversation about loneliness that we're about to get into. And the first thing I'd like to ask you is, do you think are we more lonely after lockdown and COVID, or are we a different type of loneliness? And like, what are your thoughts on that? Do we need to get back to using the internet to get off the internet, or is it a whole new ball game we're playing?
So I think the answer is yes, but there's a nuance to the conversation about loneliness. So as you know, I just put out this new report, The State of Belonging, where I examined this topic of loneliness, belonging, all of these things. And what I've found is that, first of all, loneliness, what is loneliness? What does that even mean? It's a subjective thing. It's a self-reported thing. It's not necessarily something you could observe in someone else and determine they have. They have to basically tell you that they're lonely in order for them to be lonely. And so it's a very amorphous kind of concept. But what I found is that there's an adjacent thing that accounts for what we're calling the loneliness epidemic and a bunch of other crazy stuff that's going on in the world. And I call that disconnection. So disconnection allows for the fact that you might be being very social. You might have people in your life that you can talk to and still feel this feeling that maybe you would call loneliness, this sense of yearning for some deeper sense of connection. There's a lot of sense of people not feeling connected to themselves. There's high depression rates. There's high rates of suicide and self-harm. There's a lot of political strife, right? There's a lot of toxicity on the internet. A lot of that comes from us being disconnected from ourselves, from each other, from our neighbors, from other humans. So the loneliness issue is, I think, a part of a larger issue of us not being as connected to one another as we need to be.
Why do you think that is? I'm not asking for a data backup. I'm asking for your gut feeling, because I thought that we spend too much time on screens. Like in our family, we have to say, right, no phones. We have to put such an amount of effort into not take our phones to the table, and we like each other and we want to speak to each other. It's why are we disconnected? Is it we got absorbed into other worlds, or do we just don't? No, I was going to ask you, one of the things is have we forgotten how to talk after COVID?
So just to speak to that for a moment, there is definitely some kind of a phenomenon of people have forgotten how to act. I've seen it at sporting events. We see it at concerts now. People are just throwing stuff at the people on stage. I mean, there is just this level of rudeness or lack of social decorum that I think it's a direct consequence of COVID. It baffles me. But in terms of this larger question of why are we disconnected? Certainly the whole screen situation is a significant factor in that. We have companies that we know have entire departments of extremely skilled, well-paid people who are dedicated to figuring out how to dominate as much of our attention as humanly possible. And so our brains are being hijacked. We're being manipulated in these incredibly powerful ways. And as humans, we have a natural desire to get more information, to learn new stuff. Because, kind of dating back to our tribal roots, information was survival. So this is actually why we have a negativity bias, why we're more interested in bad news, because somewhere in the back of our heads, in our primal wiring, bad news was helpful to us to learn, where the tigers and the bears hang out so that we don't get eaten. And so we have this natural appetite for it. What we're not evolved to be able to handle is having that in abundance and not scarcity. And that's being taken advantage of. We're naturally curious. We're naturally interested in learning more stuff. And now we're just being given so much of it that I think it's frying our brains. There's actually an amazing short story by Kurt Vonnegut that is called Harrison Bergeron, where he describes kind of a dystopian society where everybody has a little ear a little earwig in their ear, a little like radio. And every 30 seconds, a loud noise just blasts in people's ears. And so the tyrannical government is able to control everybody by basically reducing everyone's attention spans to zero. So they're unable to pay attention to anything long enough to take action. And I've just been watching that become real. Like, we're in a place now where, the United States military a few years ago basically just came out and said, so how we said UFOs aren't real? Well, they're actually real. We don't know what the heck is going on, and UFOs are real. And here's some videos. And people were like, oh my goodness. And then the next day it was like something else. And we just kind of forgot about that. And we've just had that over and over and over again with all of the craziness of news and everything. So that's been a part of it for sure. But I think that's just been an accelerant of kind of more systematic challenges that we've seen that stem from just the arc of society. We've seen a growth of individualism. We've seen a growth of materialism. We've seen decline in religious participation and civic participation. So, there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. But I think what we have now is the ability to at least look at it long enough to say, okay, we understand kind of what's going on. Now let's talk about what we can do about it and what a lot of people are already doing about it, which is not to be overly podcast pluggy, but that's kind of where I put a lot of my energy when I was working on this report.
In podcasts.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I'm also doing an interview series and producing a podcast as well.
That's the one you're documenting on the. I've seen it coming up on the Instagram feed, which we'll put into the thing here. All these different people that are doing stuff around the world. That's it, isn't it?
Yeah, there's so much to be inspired by, and truly, this is rooted in what I first witnessed with the coworking movement, which is that you can have something that is a good idea that resonates, that you can put online, you can open source it, or you can just tell people the story and then make it clear, hey, there's nothing stopping you from doing this in your city. And that we've witnessed over the course of the last 18 years, how that can actually change entire industries or entire society's relationship with fundamental parts of it.
Have you, I'm sure you have, but have you followed Dan and the Blue Zone thing?
The Blue Zones, yeah. I did a little bit of reading about it, and it's amazing.
So I think it was like 2019 or something, I read his book. It popped up on, customers who also brought this, brought that kind of thing, getting my attention. And so one of the, and I just watched the whole thing on Netflix. I mean, I say the whole thing is like 6 episodes, and there's all these things that make a blue zone. And for those of you who don't know, blue zones are areas around the world. There's Sardinia, there's a place in Japan I can't remember the name of, there's Costa Rica, and people live the longest in these areas. So more people live to over 100 and have lived to over 100 for the last century, than anywhere else on the planet. And so, unsurprisingly, a lot of it is down to diet, but he also puts in things like people who are in, doesn't matter what faith group you're in, but people who are in a faith group and have that coming together and, unity and community and all those beautiful things you and I love, that aids, that sense of connection, which is where I'm going for the purpose of our podcast here. That sense of connection is vital for longevity. And there's all the things you'd expect in there, exercise and fresh air and stuff like that. But the one I was not surprised, but the one, the way he stressed that, if you belong to a faith community, your sense of purpose is higher and your sense of connection on a regular basis is more. I'm sure that must have popped up in something you did.
Yeah, we are, like, I could get super metaphysical about this, but our existence is so much about its relativity to others. It's relational. So and I think that we've been maybe led astray in terms of our mentality around this, that it's not just about us maximizing our own individual happiness and all of those things, but it's about our feeling valued. They want to feel like they're contributing something. And when they don't get that in a healthy context, they will find it, or they'll be prone to be manipulated by an unhealthy context. And you'll find, for example, people who are really active in QAnon, they feel tremendous sense of belonging. They feel tremendous sense of purpose. They feel tremendous sense of pride. And it's all these things that we want people to feel, but it's coming from this very insidious place. So yeah, we need to feel like we have a reason to be here, that we're contributing something good to the world around us. And if we don't find that in a healthy place, we might find it in an unhealthy place.
Yeah, what's so one of the things I was going to ask is everyone in society lonely, or does it target certain groups or certain economic demographics or part of the world? Because I've got an idea in my little universe, but is everyone on the planet being lonely at the same time?
No, not at all. And that's part of what I think is an opportunity. So there are a number of people who are disproportionately experiencing loneliness. Young adults, for one, 61% of young adults aged 18 to 25 reported serious loneliness. This is in the US, and only compared to only 24% of adults aged 55 to 65. So you've definitely got an issue among younger folks. There's not just loneliness, but there's this sense of what's the word? Ennui. There's like bleak outlooks pervade among the younger folks. And you've got, of course, folks from marginalized communities deal with, on top of all the things that all of us are dealing with, these multiplying factors of stigmas and discrimination and all kinds of other factors. And that shows up in the statistics. Mothers, specifically mothers of young children, are disproportionately experiencing loneliness, especially since the start of the pandemic, and remote workers. So there are some factors there. But interestingly, one of the things that really helped me shift my mindset and helped set me on this course was an interview that I did a few years ago with a co-working space owner. And gosh, I'm really angry that I don't remember his name right now, but he's in Sao Paulo. And he said, what's the deal with you guys in this loneliness conversation? I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, all of my American friends keep talking about loneliness and loneliness this, loneliness that. He said, nobody here is lonely. He said, if anything, we spend so much time with each other that we could use a little bit of time not around lots of other people. And it made me realize that I was being super ignorant, painting with broad strokes, that loneliness was just kind of this universal thing. It's not. As you mentioned, in the blue zones, Okinawa was the place in Japan. Loneliness is less of an issue there. Okay, well, why? What are they doing differently that the rest of the world isn't, that we can learn from and that we can apply? Those are the kinds of things that I'm very, very interested in.
There's been all the way along, ever since I first really got into co-working in 2010, every place I've been, there's been some, and I was looking for it a little bit because I know London and I like all the romance around London and cities and stuff like this, but someone said something along the lines of, I find it really weird that I'm in a city with, millions of people and I still feel lonely. And there's a writing group that still happens in London in co-working spaces. And we all turned up. I was in London, for my monthly trip. And we all sat around the table at Creative Works and we were going to start writing. And we all go around the table and say, what are you writing? And then we spent an hour and a half talking about loneliness in a big city. And it is one of the best conversations I've ever had in my life. And if I'd recorded it, it would have killed it. You know what I mean? But it was, I'm almost like in tears talking about it because everyone had some kind of relatable thing. And I think that session at Creative Works in E17 just like bonded that group because everyone was like, yeah, I was thinking that too, And we were looking at, there were lulls in conversation where we look around and the co-working space is packed and the coffee machine is going off and there's all these things to go to and it's a very connected community. But, there's still this thread of loneliness going on.
Yeah. And that's what I'm finding is that belonging is not purely a social or a one-dimensional, one-degree kind of a thing. It's actually very nuanced. I identified, I think, 10 different elements of belonging that go from belonging to yourself to belonging with family and with partner and those folks, to belonging with your work environment, with people of shared interest, belonging with your neighborhood and your region, and ultimately belonging with some kind of sense of something larger. And so I found the same thing. I was in New York City. I was going to tons of meetups. I was going to all kinds of really great events. And I still was feeling lonely. I was still feeling the sense of disconnection, and I didn't understand why. And it took me a few years to really catch on to this, but it's because it's not just that one thing. And in fact, if you are socially connected, but not connected in the other ways that you need to be, that's when you become susceptible, where you, for example, if I was not very secure in my own identity, and I was going out and being social and connecting to lots of people, I might find myself not really clear about who I am in that conversation, maybe trying to fit in, maybe trying to change who I am and how I behave, and ultimately moving away from a healthy balance for myself. And so in some cases, I think it's actually healthy for us not to necessarily try to be super social. Solving the issue of loneliness or of disconnection doesn't always mean go out and be more social. And in fact, when I talk to people about this and I say, okay, talk to me about what your concerns are, and, and we start talking about, well, what are potential solutions? And I say, Tony, look, don't try to ask me to go be more social. Don't try to ask me to go hang out at another event or something. I'm too tired. I'm not interested. I don't want to deal with it. And I think that to some degree is healthy. To some degree, we need to be able to come back home to ourselves, get our house in order, and understand how we want to engage with the world around us before we can do so in a way that we know will be good for us. What I think is an amazing opportunity for co-working spaces and for other third places is that they can start to provide the invitations for people to start to come out of the woodwork and re-engage in a way that is healthy and that is unlike what they are used to from before.
I really agree with that. I was going to, as you were saying that segment there, I was thinking how do people do that? Because it'd be very easy for me at this point to say, well, what I did, Tony, but how would you recommend that getting to know yourself, especially if there's loads of stuff going on? You need to find ways to connect to yourself, and then you'll be better at connecting to other people. But how would you recommend people do that? Or because I'm stumbling on that question there, Tony, is because saying one size fits all is obviously not the answer. But what things have you found have worked for people?
Yeah, it's a larger question. There's a lot of different ways you can approach it, but I want to offer up something that I think could be really fun and accessible. And that is to get out of the house, put away your phone, go for a walk, and just notice. Be out in the environment around you and build a relationship with it. Find a favorite spot that you can walk to where you can just hang for a minute and observe the world around you, and find a favorite thing about sitting in that spot. Is there a bird song that you enjoy listening to? Is there a tree that looks particularly friendly? Whatever that is, just start to spend time crafting that relationship with the environment around you and extend that as you go. So one of the other things that I'm very interested in is this idea of favorites. People who are happy, people who feel a strong sense of connectedness have favorites. They have a favorite cafe. They have a favorite seat in the cafe. They have a favorite time of day to be sitting in that cafe. There is this strong sense of reverence and connection to really just very ordinary daily things, but there's an appreciation for the beauty of those things. And those are things that are accessible to us. So if you're sitting here thinking about this right now, literally, if you don't already have this, pull up Google Maps, or don't. Just get out of the house, leave your phone off, in your bag or whatever it is, and just go find something. Think about what are the cafes or what are the hangout spots in town where you just feel an intuitive sense of good vibes and good energy, and go hang out there. I just moved to a new city and I don't know anybody. I didn't know anybody here. My wife and I moved here a couple months ago, and we found a cafe in town that we walked in, and it's full of all these cool things. And the owner was behind the bar, and he welcomed us in and introduced himself. And we said, there's a vibe here. And so I've just started to go back and hanging out there, and good things have started to happen just by virtue of being in environments that are nourishing and interesting. And so there's a lot of little things like that we can do.
All of that, totally. So I'm going to give an example here. On 2 weeks before I was recording this podcast with you, I was enthusiastically cooking an amazing prawn spaghetti pasta dish, and I took the pan off the hot top too fast and splashed all the water on my foot. So I burnt my foot, and I've hardly moved in the last 2 weeks. And everything you just do that you described there, I do. I moved to a new city and everything like that, and go and sit down places. I walk or run about 10 miles every day, and none of that's happened. So my whole physiology has changed. I'm very happy, but I feel like sluggish and out of, because I haven't been doing all the things you do. And the other thing that is the lifeblood is, I walk to Fento, the little co-working space here, every day and back again. And that involves, saying hello to the same people in the park because I'm on the same route and everything like that. And, at first, when we moved here a year ago, I felt a bit lonely because I didn't know people. Because I've walked around so much, I see the mayor of Vigo in the street and I say, hola, and he acknowledges me. So a bit of me thinks, well, obviously he knows, it's Bernie Mitchell. But just seeing people, even if you don't say anything to them, is I don't know, for me, it's an energy giver. And being out and about and connected with your local environment is. I knew that anyway, and I believed it anyway. But now I've been sort of, having my own sort of mini lockdown experience because of my injury. I believe in it even more. I'm really, really missing it. I'm like anxious because I can't go running and walking and saying hello to people.
Yeah, and I'll also say that what we're talking about can be accessible, I'd like to think, regardless of exactly your circumstance. You don't need to be super social. Even if you find that spot, that cafe or that co-working space or whatever that environment is, library, park, you don't have to be social. Just being in the environment can be nourishing. And this can happen at home too. I actually ran an event during peak COVID. It was like spring of 2020 called Zoom Out. That was entirely over the telephone. People called in and they listened to me guide them. And then I facilitated them into breakout rooms with other people. And part of what we did there was we just started by centering ourselves in the space that we're in, which was our homes. We were all certainly in our homes. We couldn't be anywhere else. And said, okay, what can we observe about the environment around us? First of all, for this hour that we were on the phone together, go up to each one of your screens, run your hand across them, thank them for what they do for you, and then turn them off. And then sit in your favorite spot and look around and see what catches your attention. Maybe it's a book on the shelf. Maybe it's a treasured item from a travel, from your travels, those kinds of things. And then just notice what feelings it's bringing up for you. And then I put them into a breakout room to discuss those things with each other. And so just cultivating this sense of presence, the sense of appreciation is a good starting point. You can do it completely by yourself in your home. And what's fun, Bernie, is that once we start getting more ready to be social together in healthy ways about this, if you're running something like a co-working space, or a cafe or a church or a library or any of these things. All right. Well, the religious institutions already have what I'm about to say covered, but the rest of us are still figuring some of this out, is that we can propagate some of those things together. We can cultivate a sense of appreciation, of sacredness, of specialness, of traditions, things like that, that really, really help to accelerate this sense of connectedness and belonging. We like to celebrate stuff. We like to acknowledge shifts that are happening. And this goes way back. So something like celebrating the harvest, acknowledging the change in season, things like that. Those are things that we have been celebrating as humans for millennia. And so why is that important? It's in part because it helps us to mark the passage of time, to reflect on how things are going, to appreciate the fact that, hey, we made it through another winter. We're ready to go into the next season, whatever that is. And it gives us such an incredible sense of connection and belonging to each other. Where I live here in Norwalk, we have the big event of the year is Oyster Fest. It's one weekend a year. It kicks off literally today as we're taping this. And my wife and I are, we enjoy the occasional oyster, but we're going to go because it's the big event in town and it's a coastal town. Oysters are an important part of the history of the city and the economy. And so it's something that we've decided collectively as a city to celebrate and make a really big deal once a year. And it gives us that bellwether. So there's a lot that we can do from by ourselves to local spaces all the way up to, cities and regions and nations.
Well, we've got a few more minutes. I've got one more big question. Because, what do you think, going back to the zoom out, what do you think we learned from lockdown and COVID? Because that's the most severe thing that's ever happened sort of at a global scale in my lifetime, probably, our lifetime. Like what do you think we learned from it that you'd like us to take forward?
I think that we're probably still too near to it to have a full understanding of what the ultimate answer to that question will be. I think a lot of different people have learned a lot of different things. Some people have grown to appreciate things more, some less. But I would say that for me, what I found is that once again, and this is one of the big things that I've learned when I was doing this research, is that so much of our experience is about our perspective and our attitude. People who saw COVID as an opportunity or found a way to take the circumstances and make something positive out of it are coming out of COVID way better off. And people who approached it with a different attitude had a different experience. And so one of the things I'm finding, for example, is that for a lot of people who are lonely, they claim they don't have someone that they feel they can confide in and talk to, but they do. And they just don't think they do. Some are genuinely like they do not have friends. They do not have people that they can confide in. But my strong kind of impression is that there are a lot of people who feel disconnected, who could feel more connected if they can just change the way that they look at things. That's part of why I'm suggesting, getting out of the house, building a different relationship with the environment around you. We're trying to reprogram our attitudes in an environment that seems hell-bent on making us cynical. And so if we spend too much time watching the news or scrolling social media, it's very easy for us to come away with a negative attitude about the world and about our lives and all of those things. But if we realize, hey, I've actually got some amazing friends. I'm actually living in a wonderful place, or there are wonderful things about where I live, even if it isn't necessarily a wonderful place. That attitude shift can make all of the difference. And so I think in terms of coming out of COVID, I think it became apparent to me just how true that has always been.
I 100% agree with that because there's been safeguards I've put in place. I'm walking around in a bad mood in the morning. I know if I go and eat a donut, it will give me one feeling. If I go and meditate, it will give me another feeling. And the best thing, if I'm walking around the house annoyed at everybody for more than 10 minutes, I will just go and walk, and I'll come back and I won't even remember being annoyed. But I have to be willing to go for the walk, and there's that little switch there. And in Urban MBA in London, throughout the whole COVID thing, a big part of the Urban MBA course, and a lot of people listening to this in London will know them, but is about the mindset you have about your life and your business. And mindset was like top of the list for how that group of people got through COVID. And some of those people did incredibly well during the COVID. And a lot of it was down to, the mindset they adopted, and not in that kind of, slightly crass, never waste a good opportunity. There's always opportunity in crisis, not that mode. It's just the way you make yourself see the world in a kind of more of a Viktor Frankl way than a kind of sees the opportunity in misfortune way. Let's just wrap up, Tony, with this is definitely not the first, the only conversation we're going to have about this report. Can you just frame the report, and we're going to put links in the show notes to all of this, where you can follow it online, how you can listen to the podcast. And, this has always been a big conversation around unconferences and, other online forums in the co-working universe. So this is not like a new idea you've had, Tony, is it? This has been bubbling for years.
For many years. Yeah. I mean, my interest in co-working stemmed from this deeper desire to feel a stronger sense of connection to the world around me, to my city, to my people. So it's all been part of the same journey. So the report is called the State of Belonging 2023, and you can find it at belongfulness.com, belongfulness.com. That's also our handle on all the socials. So that's Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, even on Facebook. You remember Facebook? And we're also on YouTube. So remember Facebook? So we also have the podcast, and it's also on video. So you can find that on YouTube and on any of your podcasting platforms. Just search Belongfulness pretty much anywhere. You'll find our stuff. And very shortly, by the time you listen to this, you'll also be able to find that report on Amazon in print as well.
And where out of all these weirdo social platforms we have nowadays, where do you best like to engage and say hello to people?
I'm finding it's very interesting, Bernie. I'm finding there's three things that are working for me in different ways. Twitter is working for me in terms of passive consumption. I'm learning a lot there. I gathered a ton of information from my report just by going back through what I've favorited over the past several years. So thank you, past me, research assistant. All of a sudden, all of that compulsive scrolling actually paid off to some degree because I learned a lot that I could use. But I get no engagement when I tweet right now. So it's just not working in that way. Instagram for friends. So if I post a story, that is the most likely way I'm going to actually connect with and reach my friends. And then LinkedIn for business. When I posted about this new report on every platform, LinkedIn drove 100% of the actual activity. So that's kind of how it's been working for me.
I don't know, mate. LinkedIn is like Twitter was in 2012 nowadays. It's everyone I spoke with on a regular basis in 2012 is now on LinkedIn, and we basically talk like we did on Twitter. And I never thought I'd say that about LinkedIn. LinkedIn was corporate Western society.
Maybe I don't know the answer, but maybe it just is because LinkedIn is very honest and clear about what it is. It's a place for people to go and discuss business. And I think the waters got muddied for a long time where I remember I was questioning myself about this with Twitter when it was really in its heyday in the late 2000s, early 2010s when I was running New York City, where I was saying, okay, I've got my personal Twitter account and this is my way of connecting with my friends, but I also want to promote the stuff I'm working on. And so do I use this account to also, promote my stuff? Where is that line? And it's an interesting thing. So the fact that LinkedIn, everybody knows what their expectations are going in, maybe contributes to that.
I think that's very accurate. Listen, we need to hang up because I can feel another, reminiscing of the good old days of social media coming on. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and attention today. I've run to the show notes and there'll be links to all the, I'm going to say it wrong, belongfulness social medias and the report. And again, get into that report. If you go to either londoncoworkingassembly.com or the coworking assembly coworking.eu, and you can sign up to what's going on in all our events and our podcasts and our blogs that we've been producing every week since the dawn of time. Our next sort of in-person appearance is at the Workspace Design Show in Amsterdam, which is the 11th and 12th of October. And we'll be doing a co-working assembly thing with the Dutch Co-working Association there. So the whole exhibition is free to attend. So if you can just get yourself to Amsterdam, you can hang out with us there and have a little good old co-working shindig. Be careful out there. It is a jungle. And thanks for your time and attention.